A man had 50 hotels, £1 billion, and everything money could buy. But when he gave 3 women unlimited credit cards for 3 days, what they spent it on absolutely shattered him. One bought yachts and diamonds. One used it to climb the corporate ladder. But the third woman, the one he'd never even noticed, she spent less than £500. And what she did with that money didn't just break his heart, it completely changed his life. This is a true story about discovering that the richest person in the room isn't always the one with the most money. Welcome to Voice of Reality. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you a story that changed everything I thought I knew about wealth and love. In the heart of London, in a glass tower that touched the clouds, there lived a man named David Sterling. From the outside, his life looked like a dream come true. He owned the largest hotel chain in Europe, 50 luxury properties across the continent, each one more beautiful than the last. His name was whispered in boardrooms. His face graced magazine covers. When he walked into a room, people stopped talking and started watching. But here's what nobody knew. Here's what the cameras never captured. David was desperately, achingly alone. Every morning, he would stand by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, looking down at the city below. Thousands of people rushing to work, living their lives, connecting with each other. And up there in his tower, surrounded by marble and gold, David felt like he was living behind glass. Close enough to see life, but never quite able to touch it. He had everything money could buy. Cars that purred like cats. Watches that cost more than houses. Suits tailored to perfection. But when he came home at night, the silence was so thick it felt like drowning. His mother had passed away 3 years ago. Before she died, she'd held his hand and said something he couldn't forget. David, my darling boy, marry someone who loves the size of your heart, not the size of your bank account. Real love asks for nothing, but gives everything. He nodded then, thinking he understood. But now, looking back, he realized he'd been surrounded by the wrong people all along. There was Vanessa, his girlfriend. Stunning, sophisticated, always dressed like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. She sent him selfies from Milan, Paris, Dubai, wherever his credit card could take her. Her texts were full of heart emojis and designer shopping bags. But when he'd been sick last month with the flu, feverish and weak, she hadn't come. She'd sent her assistant with soup instead. "I can't risk getting sick before the charity gala," she texted. The charity gala, where she'd worn a dress that cost more than some people earned in a year. Then there was Nicole, his personal assistant. Sharp as a knife, efficient as a machine. She knew his schedule better than he did, could handle any crisis with a phone call and a smile. But he'd overheard her once at a company party, talking to her friend by the bathroom. "If I play this right," she'd said, "I could go from assistant to wife." Imagine that upgrade. The words had stuck to him like grease he couldn't wash off. And then there was Grace. Sweet, quiet Grace, who cleaned his penthouse every day. She arrived at 7 in the morning and left by 4. She never asked for anything, never complained. She moved through his home like a ghost, tidying away his messes, washing his dishes, making his bed. He barely knew anything about her except that she was kind. Once, he'd accidentally left his laptop open to a news article about children in hospital. When he returned, he found Grace standing there with tears running down her face, wiping them quickly when she saw him. "Sorry, Mr. Sterling," she'd whispered. I can't stand seeing children suffer." He'd never forgotten that moment. The rawness of it. The genuine feeling. Now, standing in his penthouse with the city lights twinkling below, David made a decision. A decision that would crack his world wide open and show him truths he'd been too afraid to see. He called his head of security, a man named James who'd worked for him for a decade. "James," David said, his voice steady, but his heart pounding. "I need you to do something unusual. I'm going to give 3 women in my life access to unlimited money for 3 days. I want to know what they do with it. Not to trap them. Not to humiliate them. I just need to know the truth." There was silence on the other end. Then, "Understood, sir." David hung up and walked to his desk. He pulled out 3 black credit cards, each one linked to an account with no limit. He placed each card in a velvet envelope. On each envelope, he wrote a name in silver ink. Vanessa, Nicole, Grace. 3 women, 3 chances, 3 different hearts about to be revealed. He wasn't doing this to be cruel. He wasn't playing God. He was simply exhausted from living in a world where everyone wore a mask, where every "I love you" came with an invisible price tag, where kindness was a strategy and affection was a transaction. His mother's words echoed in his mind again. Real love asks for nothing, but gives everything. Tomorrow, he would hand out these cards. Tomorrow, he would tell them they could spend however they wanted for 3 days. No rules. No judgment. Complete freedom. And then he would watch. Not to catch them, but to finally see them clearly. Because David had learned something painful in his 42 years on this earth. You can't buy genuine love. You can't purchase real kindness. And you certainly can't force someone to care about you for who you are rather than what you have. But you can create a moment where truth reveals itself. That night, David didn't sleep. He sat in his study, looking at the 3 envelopes on his desk, wondering what the next 3 days would show him. Wondering if maybe, just maybe, one person in his life saw him as more than a wallet with a heartbeat. The city below kept moving. Life kept happening. And somewhere in the darkness, 3 women were about to be given a test they didn't know they were taking. A test that would change all of their lives forever. The next morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of London weather that makes you want to stay in bed forever. But David was up early, showered, dressed in a simple sweater instead of his usual suit. Today wasn't about being a billionaire. Today was about being a man searching for truth. First stop, Vanessa. He met her at the Dorchester, her favorite hotel, where she was having breakfast with friends. She glided over to him in a white pantsuit, sunglasses perched on her head, phone in hand. Darling. She kissed the air beside his cheeks. What a surprise. He pulled out the first envelope. I have something for you. Her eyes lit up the way they always did when gifts were involved. She opened it right there, and her perfectly painted lips formed an O of delight. What's this? A gift. No limits. 3 days. Spend it however you want. She didn't ask why. She didn't ask if he was okay. She actually squealed, and hugged him tight. You're the absolute best. I'm going to have so much fun. And just like that, she was back with her friends, already on her phone, already planning. David felt something twist in his chest. She hadn't even asked what the occasion was. Next, Nicole. He found her at the office, sharp and professional as always, clicking through emails with laser focus. When he handed her the envelope, she studied it carefully before opening it. David, what's this about? Call it a bonus. A thank you for your hard work. 3 days. Spend it however you'd like. Nicole's eyes flickered with something he couldn't quite read. Surprise? Calculation? She smiled slowly. That's incredibly generous. Thank you. You've earned it, he said, watching her face. She nodded, slipping the card into her purse. I won't waste it. Somehow, those words felt heavy. Finally, Grace. He returned to his penthouse around noon. Grace was in the kitchen, scrubbing the countertops, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore the same worn cardigan she always wore, the one with the small hole near the wrist that she'd never replaced. Grace, he said softly. She jumped slightly, turning around. Mr. Sterling. I didn't hear you come in. Do you need something? He held out the 3rd envelope. This is for you. She stared at it like it might bite her. For me? Yes. It's a gift. 3 days. Spend it however you want. You deserve it. Grace's hands trembled as she took the envelope. She opened it slowly, carefully, and when she saw the card inside, her eyes went wide. Mr. Sterling, I don't understand. This is too much. I can't possibly. You can, he said gently. Please. Just take a few days. Do something for yourself. Tears welled up in her eyes. But why? Because you work hard. Because you're kind. Because I wanted to. She looked down at the card, then back up at him. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. As he left the kitchen, he glanced back. Grace was still standing there, holding the envelope like it was made of glass, tears rolling down her cheeks. 3 women. 3 cards. 3 days. Now came the hardest part. Watching. The reports started coming in by evening. James called first with Vanessa's update. Sir, she spent £28,000 already. Designer boutique on Bond Street. Then lunch at Sketch with 8 friends. She picked up the entire bill. Currently at a jewelry store, looking at diamond bracelets. David closed his eyes. 28,000 in 6 hours. And sir, James continued. She posted on Instagram. Multiple photos. Hashtags include, blessed, treat yourself, living my best life. Thank you, James. He hung up and poured himself a drink he wouldn't finish. The next update was about Nicole. She'd booked herself into a luxury spa, then made appointments with 3 different business contacts, competitors of David's company. She'd bought a new designer wardrobe and scheduled a photo shoot with a professional photographer who usually shot CEOs for magazine covers. James's voice was neutral, but the information cut deep. She's positioning herself, sir. Building her brand. I see. Should I continue monitoring?
Yes.
And Grace? There was a pause. Grace is different, sir. Different how? She went to a regular supermarket. Bought groceries. Basic things, rice, vegetables, bread. Then she went to a hospital and paid off someone's medical bill. A neighbor, we think. After that, she visited a children's home in South London. Brought books, art supplies, and food. She spent less than £200 total. David's throat went tight. £200? Yes, sir. She's barely touched the account. That night, David couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Vanessa's Instagram posts, all smiles and champagne. He thought about Nicole's calculated moves, building her empire on his generosity. And he thought about Grace, in a children's home, reading to kids who had nothing. The next day brought more of the same. Vanessa rented a yacht for a party. Nicole had dinner with a CEO from David's rival company. Grace donated to a women's shelter and bought winter coats for homeless people on the street. By day 3, the picture was crystal clear. Vanessa had spent over £90,000 on herself and her image. Nicole had spent £40,000 investing in her own career advancement. Grace had spent less than £500, and every penny had gone to helping others. 3 women. 3 hearts. 3 completely different souls. And David knew exactly what he had to do next. David arranged dinner for the 3 of them. Not at a fancy restaurant, but in his own penthouse dining room. He wanted this to be private. Intimate.
Raw.
The table was set simply. White plates, plain glasses, no fancy centerpieces. The chandelier above cast a warm glow, but the atmosphere was anything but comfortable. Vanessa arrived first, in a dress that probably cost more than a used car, her new diamond bracelet catching the light. She looked annoyed. Darling, why the mysterious dinner? And why is your maid here? Grace had just walked in, looking terrified in a simple dress, standing near the door like she wanted to disappear. Nicole arrived last, polished and professional, her eyes scanning the room, calculating. Please sit, David said quietly. They sat. Vanessa checked her phone. Nicole folded her hands. Grace looked at her lap. David remained standing. I'm sure you're all wondering why I called you here. Is this about the card? Vanessa asked, twirling her wine glass. Because I had the most amazing 3 days. You should see what I bought. I posted everything, did you see? I saw, David said softly. Nicole leaned forward slightly. If this is a business dinner, David, you could have just scheduled. It's not a business dinner. His voice was calm but firm. 3 days ago, I gave each of you the same gift. An unlimited credit card. Complete freedom. No rules. Vanessa smiled. And it was wonderful. I told you it was a gift, David continued, but I wasn't completely honest. It was also a test. The room went still. Grace's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. Nicole's expression hardened. A test. I needed to know the truth, David said, his voice thick with emotion. I needed to see who you really are when you think nobody's watching. When there are no consequences. When you can do anything you want. Vanessa laughed, but it sounded hollow. You spied on us? Are you serious? I observed, David corrected. And I learned everything I needed to know. He turned to Vanessa first. You spent £93,000 in 3 days. Designer clothes, jewelry, parties, champagne. You posted every moment on social media. You turned my gift into a performance for strangers. Her face flushed red. You told me to spend it however I wanted. I did, David said quietly. And you showed me exactly what matters to you. Not us. Not our relationship. Just the image. Just the lifestyle. That's not fair. You didn't call me once, David said, and now his voice cracked just a little. Not once in 3 days did you think to thank me.
To check on me. To share any of it with me.
You shared it with the entire world except the person who gave it to you. Vanessa stood up, furious. I'm not going to sit here and be judged by you. You're twisted, David. This whole thing is sick. Maybe, he said. But at least now I know the truth. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, her heels echoing on the marble floor. The door slammed behind her. Silence. David turned to Nicole. She was watching him carefully, her face unreadable. Nicole, he said gently, you're brilliant. You're one of the smartest people I've ever worked with. But, she said coldly, but you used my gift to advance your own career. You had meetings with my competitors. You built your brand. You positioned yourself as my equal, my partner, when you're not. Nicole's jaw tightened. Ambition isn't a crime, David. No, he agreed. But deception is. You weren't investing in us. You were investing in your exit strategy. She stood slowly, smoothing her skirt. I've given you 5 years of my life. I've worked nights, weekends, holidays. I've saved your company from disasters you'll never even know about. And this is how you repay me? By accusing me of disloyalty. I'm not accusing you of anything, David said sadly. I'm just acknowledging what I saw. You don't love me, Nicole. You love what I can do for your career. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Hurt, maybe, or anger. Then it was gone, replaced by cold professionalism. Good luck with your experiment, she said quietly. And then she too was gone. The room felt enormous now. Just David and Grace, sitting at opposite ends of a table meant for 10. Grace was trembling. Mr. Sterling, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. I can return the card. I kept all the receipts. I can pay it all back. Grace. His voice stopped her.
Please.
Look at me. She lifted her eyes, and they were swimming with tears. David sat down across from her. I saw what you did. She looked terrified. You paid for your neighbor's hospital bills. You donated to a children's home. You bought coats for people living on the streets. You spent less than £500 on other people and nothing on yourself. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry? David's voice broke. Grace, why are you apologizing? Because I didn't use it the way you probably wanted. I know I should have bought something nice, something for myself, but I couldn't. Not when there are people who need it more. A tear rolled down David's cheek. He didn't wipe it away. Do you know what you showed me? He asked softly. She shook her head. You showed me what a real heart looks like. Not one that takes. Not one that calculates. One that gives. Simply because it can. Grace was crying now, fully crying, her shoulders shaking. I don't deserve to be here, she sobbed. I don't belong in your world. David reached across the table and took her hand. Yes, he said. You do. The days after that dinner felt like walking through fog. Everything David thought he knew about his life had been stripped away, and he was left with a startling, beautiful truth. The person who saw him most clearly was the one he'd barely noticed at all. Grace tried to return to her normal routine. She showed up at 7 in the morning, ready to clean, But David stopped her at the door. Grace, no. She looked confused. But Mr. Sterling, the house needs less cleaning and more living, he said gently. And please call me David. I can't do that, sir. Why not? Because you're you, and I'm just what? Just a person with more kindness in her little finger than most people have in their entire body. She blushed deeply, looking at her shoes. Over the following weeks, something shifted in that enormous penthouse. David hired a cleaning service to handle the house, but he asked Grace to stay, not as a maid, but as something else entirely. He wasn't quite sure what yet, but he knew he needed her presence in his life. At first, Grace didn't know what to do with herself. She'd wander the halls, uncomfortable with the idea of not working. So David gave her a project. He wanted to turn one entire floor of his building into a community center, a place where people could come for job training, meals, counseling, childcare. I don't know how to do that, Grace protested. Neither do I, David admitted. But you know what people need. You've lived it. And I have the resources. Together, maybe we can build something real. So they did. Grace would meet with architects and designers, and at first, she was terrified to speak up. But David would look at her and say, "What do you think, Grace?" And slowly, her voice got stronger. "The training room needs better lighting," she'd say. "And the childcare area should have windows so parents can see their kids while they're in classes. The dining area should feel warm, not institutional. People need dignity, not charity." Every suggestion she made came from her heart, and every single one made the project better. They began spending more time together. Not as employer and employee, but as partners in this mission. They'd have lunch together, sitting on the floor of the construction site, eating sandwiches, talking about life. "Why did you become a maid?" David asked her one day. Grace was quiet for a moment. "My mom was sick for a long time. Cancer. I was caring for her and I needed work I could do on my own schedule. Cleaning was flexible. After she passed, I just kept doing it. It was honest work. Simple work." "Did you ever want anything else?" She smiled sadly. "I wanted to be a teacher once. I loved children. But life had other plans." David made a decision that night. He enrolled Grace in an online teaching certification program. When she tried to protest, he held up his hand. "This isn't charity, Grace. This is investment. You're going to run the children's programs in our community center. You need to be qualified." She cried. Then she hugged him for the first time, a real hug, full of gratitude, and something else neither of them was ready to name yet. Months passed. The community center opened and it was beautiful. Not fancy, but warm. Real. It had classrooms and a kitchen and a bright playroom where children laughed. Grace ran the children's programs, and she was magnificent at it. The kids adored her. Parents trusted her. And David? He started showing up there regularly. Not as the billionaire donor, but as a volunteer. He'd read stories to kids. He'd serve meals. He'd sit and listen to people's problems without trying to fix everything with money. One evening, after everyone had gone home, David found Grace in the playroom, picking up toys and humming softly to herself. "You're happy," he observed. She looked up, smiling. "I am. This place, it feels like purpose, you know?" "I do know," he said. "Because of you." She shook her head. "Because of us." They stood there in the dimming light, surrounded by children's drawings on the walls, and David realized something that took his breath away. He was in love with her. Not because she was convenient or beautiful or useful, but because she made him want to be better. Because her heart called to his heart in a language money had never been able to speak. "Grace," he said quietly. She looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw that she knew. She'd known for a while. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of losing myself in your world." He stepped closer. "Then let's build a new world. One where neither of us has to pretend. Where we can just be two people who see each other. Really see each other." "I'm not fancy, David. I don't know which fork to use at those dinners. I don't understand stock markets or business deals. I don't care about any of that. Your friends will judge you." then they're not my friends. The media will say terrible things. Let them.
He took her hands.
Grace, for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm home. Not in this building. Not in this city.
With you.
You're my home. She was crying again, but this time she was smiling too. Are you sure? She asked. I've never been more sure of anything. And there, in a playroom filled with toys and dreams, a billionaire and a former maid chose each other. Not because of what they could gain, but because of what they could give. True love doesn't ask what you have. It asks who you are. And they had finally found each other. 2 years later, the penthouse had changed completely. Oh, it was still in the same building, still had those floor-to-ceiling windows with the view of London. But it didn't feel like a museum anymore. It felt like a home. There were photos on the walls now, not professional portraits, but real moments captured in time. Grace laughing in the community center garden. David covered in paint after helping redecorate the children's playroom. The two of them at a small, private wedding ceremony with only a handful of people they truly loved. The media had gone crazy, of course. Billionaire marries former maid, the headline screamed. Some people were cruel. Some called it a publicity stunt. Others said Grace was a gold digger who'd played the long game. But David and Grace didn't read the articles. They were too busy living. The community center had expanded. They'd opened 2 more locations across London. Each one offered free job training, childcare, counseling, and meals. Grace ran all the children's programs, and she was brilliant at it. She'd completed her teaching certification and had started mentoring other women who wanted to work with kids. David had stepped back from his hotel empire, promoting others to CEO positions. He still owned the company, but he'd learned something profound. Making money and making meaning are 2 very different things. One filled his bank account. The other filled his soul. Every Thursday, without fail, they volunteered together at the original community center. David would serve meals while Grace taught art classes. They'd work side by side, and sometimes they'd catch each other's eye across the room and just smile. No words needed. One Thursday evening, as they were cleaning up after the dinner service, a young woman approached them. She was maybe 19, thin, with nervous eyes. "Mrs. Sterling," she said quietly to Grace. Grace turned, smiling warmly. "Please, just call me Grace. How can I help you?" I just wanted to say thank you. I came here 6 months ago. I had nothing. I was sleeping in my car. I was so ashamed." Her voice cracked. "You gave me a job training course. You helped me find housing. You watched my daughter while I went to interviews. Last week, I got hired.
Full-time.
I start Monday." Tears were streaming down her face now. "You didn't have to do any of that.
You didn't know me.
But you treated me like I mattered. Like I was worth something." Grace pulled the young woman into a hug. "You do matter. You always did." David watched this exchange, and his heart felt so full it hurt. This was what wealth was supposed to do. Not build higher towers or buy faster cars, but lift people up. Create possibility where there was only despair. Later that night, back in the penthouse, David found Grace standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I'm thinking about how different my life is now," she said softly. 2 years ago, I was scrubbing these floors, invisible. Now I'm standing here with you, and we're actually making a difference." "You were never invisible, Grace. I was just blind." She turned in his arms to face him. "You gave me a chance to dream again, to remember that I have value beyond what I can do for others." "No," David said firmly. "You gave yourself that. I just got out of the way." They stood there in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd found each other across an impossible divide. "Do you ever miss it?" Grace asked. "The old life. The parties, the glamour, the excitement." David thought about it honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it, when I thought success was just about money. But no, I don't miss the loneliness. I don't miss wondering if anyone actually cared about me. I don't miss feeling empty. And now I feel full. Whole. Like my life actually means something." Grace smiled and kissed him softly.
It does mean something. To so many people.
The next morning, they received news that the community center had been selected for a national award for social impact. They were invited to London to accept it at a ceremony with the country's elite, politicians, celebrities, philanthropists. Grace panicked. David, I can't go to something like that. Those people, they're not my people. They're not my people anymore either, David said. But we should go. Not for us. For everyone at the center. They deserve recognition. So they went. Grace wore a simple blue dress, nothing fancy. David wore a suit, but no tie. They walked into that glittering ballroom full of designer gowns and expensive jewelry, and they held hands tight. Some people whispered. Some people stared. But when Grace walked to the stage to accept the award, something magical happened. She didn't read from prepared notes. She didn't try to sound impressive. She just spoke from her heart. Thank you for this honor, she said, her voice clear and strong. But this award doesn't belong to me or my husband. It belongs to every person who walked through our doors afraid and left with hope. It belongs to every mother who found childcare so she could work. Every person who learned a new skill and changed their life. Every child who discovered that they matter. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Real change doesn't happen in boardrooms or at fancy dinners. It happens in small moments, in acts of kindness that nobody sees, in choosing to give when it would be easier to take. That's where transformation lives. The room erupted in applause.
People stood.
Some were crying, and in that moment, David realized something beautiful. Grace hadn't become part of his world. Together, they created something entirely new. A world where success was measured in lives changed, not profits earned. Where status came from serving, not from being served. That night, driving home through London streets, Grace fell asleep against David's shoulder. He looked down at her peaceful face and felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost hurt. His mother had been right all along. Real love asks for nothing, but gives everything. And he'd found it in the last place he'd ever expected to look. Not in penthouses or boardrooms. Not at parties or galas. But in the quiet heart of a woman who taught him the most important lesson of all. True wealth isn't what you have in your bank account. It's what you have in your heart. And who you choose to share it with.
The end.
If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to remember that real value isn't measured in money, but in kindness, character, and love. Thank you for listening, and may you always recognize the truly valuable people in your life.